Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Pretty simple. I saw a number today, eye-popping. The number $312 billion. That is the amount that the top 25 richest families in this country have seen their wealth increase over the last 12 months. That's an annual gain of 22%. They've seen a nice little bit of change thanks to the pandemic. Disaster capitalism never doing better. And it's one of these things that I got to tell you, it's angering and it's frustrating when you hear the front groups that they fund saying, you know, we can't do anything. We cannot possibly build better roads, bridges. We can't possibly invest in the future. We can't help kids get a start at the beginning of their academic career with universal pre-K. Can't help them get college educated. We can't do any of this stuff. Sorry. Can't do it because we're broke. And we have a political party and a half, or maybe not a whole half, a political party solely, and then a couple still left on the other side who are saying, no, we can't really raise taxes on the wealthy because they're the job creators. Even we know that that's not reality. And what's really frustrating to me is I look at that $312 billion number just in 12 months. That's what they've increased their wealth in just the last year. That's not the nearly $2 trillion that our billionaire class has put into their pocket. That's just the top 25. That's a reasonable sized bus. And you go, but Rick, they're the captains of industry. Without them, we would all be standing around looking at each other. Is that so? And what do these folks do? What do they do with their fortunes? They could be building legacies. They could be solving problems. They could make this truly the greatest place on earth. But no, we have to put up with them shooting phallic rockets into the sky and then thanking us for paying for it. We get to see their obsesses. We get to see their insane lifestyles while the rest of the folks here are struggling to put food on the table, worried about their children. Are they going to get sick in school? Being forced back into workplaces that could be dangerous. But you know what they do with their money better than anyone else? They fund euphemistically named front groups that their sole purpose is to divide and conquer we the people. You know, they're spending tons of money on what is right now a well-coordinated attack because they're starting to see that working people have had enough of it. They're starting to see the rumblings of working people who are overworked, underpaid, undervalued, mistreated. And there's no way that they can get them back with the old tools. So what they're doing is they're going back to the good old days of divide and conquer. We got to give people something else to be angry about. Because here's the thing, we're in the middle of what's being dubbed as the great resignation because people are tired of being mistreated at work. And there's another ghosting is now something new where someone will take a job and they don't show up. Because maybe they found a better job or maybe they just had a bad feeling about the one that they took and said, you know what, I changed my mind. Either way, not good signs for our employment class who have been used to desperate, pliable, obedient workers. People who are hungry enough to come to work in crummy conditions for poverty wages and not question too much of it. Just happy to, just happy to have a job. And people are finally having enough of it. And the thing that gets me is instead of creating better jobs, Instead of doing what we were told, remember back in Econ 101? Remember how we were told, when we were learning about rice and beans and all of that stuff? Remember how they told us that, if things got bad and the free market, the invisible hand would adjust and things would get better because employers would have to offer more money and better wages and conditions, and things would have to get better if they wanted to attract talent. Well, they're not doing that. Because again, they've conned us into believing, or some of us, those old narratives. But what they've done is they've spent the money that they've gotten, like I said, buying a political party and a half, or a political party and a handful. They're buying media everywhere, and literally laughing all the way to the bank. $312 billion in the last 12 months that our 25 top families have put into their account. Now, you look at this. How have they divided us? Well, the old ways. Race, gender, sexual orientation. Those have always been the biggies, right? You give somebody something else to look at while they're picking our pockets. And now, with so many different ways to attack on those fronts, slicing and dicing and pitting us against each other, let the games begin. And our billionaire-funded, euphemistically named front groups are in full spin mode. Every day my email box is full with one group or another with their little particular angle, whether it's race, gender, sexual identity, Martians, whatever their angle is to get into that right-wing pot of cash. That's where they go. Today's was, the soft bigotry of Democrats voting reforms. And I loved that one because I'm going, wait a second. I saw what you did there. You kind of turned that around. Their argument is by making it easier for minorities to vote, you're basically calling them stupid because they can't go over all the hurdles and obstacles that have been put in their way to vote. And it's your fault that you've pointing this out because they should be able to go over these hurdles that other people don't have to go over. So it's soft bigotry pointing out that it's an unequal system. It's brilliant. It's brilliant messaging. And I read it. I read it twice because this is what they do so masterfully. My other favorite today was the underlying racism of infrastructure improvements. Yes, by improving inner cities transportation networks, by creating jobs and refitting our buildings, retro-engineering our buildings and all of that, somehow that this is somehow racist. And I couldn't find it in there, but they had to throw it in there, the racism of infrastructure. And, of course, you get the ones from the school choice people who, are you handing your children over to fill in the blank? Whatever boogeyman they want to throw in there, that was there today, too. And really all it's meant to do is keep us pitted against each other, divided and angry at each other, which we're good at being. And then they hit with the main point. Slide it in a little bit, because the one thing they all agree on, regardless of which angle they take, whether it's the homophobia or the misogyny or the racism, or no matter how they came to the dance, they all leave with the same woman or the same man, which is it's the economy. They want workers to have rights. And this is where I go back to what my original thoughts have always been. As someone who grew up in a minority in a minority community, I learned very young that black and white didn't matter as much as green. Because no matter what the color of our skin was, we were all broke. And if we ever decided that we were going to come together and demand that we all got better off, our 25 families who pocketed $312 billion extra dollars on top of the billions they already had, they wouldn't be sitting on that kind of money. And that would be more equally distributed. You wouldn't have the hunger, you wouldn't have the pain, the misery, the suffering, the struggle that we have for a good majority of our country. Even people who think they're doing okay are still on the treadmill trying not to fall off, hoping that one illness, one accident, one unfortunate circumstance doesn't throw them into chaos. And this pandemic really has highlighted the fact that so many of us are 2 paychecks away from disaster. And a lot of folks, because of the moratorium, they were falling behind all along. And you see these rich people, our billionaire class, our captains and titans of industry. You see them, funding away. And it brings me back to something my grandfather always said. If you're going to see a rich guy pull a buck out of his pocket to tell you don't need something, you better spend 2 to get it. If they're spending this kind of coordinated money fighting against Biden's Build Back Better plan, which, again, I think could be better, but it's good. It's a start. It's a push. It's historic. It's, in my view, almost a reset of a lot of the last 40 years conservative attacks, which is why the billionaire class not happy about it. The billionaire class has been spending money for 40, 50 years to get to this point. This is where they want to be. They've got both hands placed firmly on the steering wheel, and they are driving this car right into the ditch where they want it to be, because they know even after they wreck the car, they're still going to get the insurance money. They're still going to be better off because they've set up a system where heads they win, tails we lose. No matter how it is, they have figured out how to play this game in such a way that, they're insulated. And it got me thinking today, I was having a conversation with a friend today, and, we were talking about, how we got to this moment, how we've been so easily separated. And, I said, look, my view on it is, you go back to my grandparents' generation, the greatest generation. They fought fascism overseas, and they came home and remained united in the workplace to fight the same kind of tyrannical behavior that you would have seen overseas here at home. And they fought for what was the most prosperous working class in history, because they understood at the end of the day, while they had many divisions, and they did a lot of the same ones, and even more deeply ingrained, it was still about wages, hours, conditions. It was still about the jobs. It was still about holding those billionaires in check. It was the militancy of that generation. And the thing is, I used to say, they're not the greatest generation. They just rose to the challenges of the time. They didn't have a choice. They were in a corner. They were backed into the corner. You don't have any choices when you're backed into a corner. You got to fight your way out. But you look at right now, are we rising to the challenges of our time? With, child hunger, just crazy. We've got homeless veterans. We've got a tsunami of people about to be thrown out of their homes. We've got millions of people without jobs. Wages are rising a bit, but nowhere near where they should be. And when people have the audacity to stand up, step forward, and speak out about, hey, we want better, immediately what happens? Well, you look at what happened at Amazon down in Bessemer, Alabama. They brought in the police that they paid off to harass people. They figured out how to get the U.S. Postal Service to bring in a special mailbox that they could monitor. They plastered union hate mail all over the bathroom stalls. They paid people to walk around with sandwich boards on their bodies, saying how bad the union is and how vote no and you can do it without dues and all of this nonsense. All the while they knew how the vote was going to turn out, because they were harassing and intimidating people, because they have the power and the money and the resource to do it. So when there's a spark of people going, hey, maybe this isn't right. Maybe we should be speaking out against this. Maybe we should say enough is enough. Maybe we should have a great resignation. Maybe we should be ghosting these crummy employers and make them better. Well, they pull out the old bag of tricks. Anything that's going to move us forward, anything that's going to get done for we the people, especially we the working people, has to be crushed, and with extreme prejudice. Because that's all they really know, isn't it? And it doesn't matter what the issue is. It's about their winning and, of course, our losing. All under the guise that we're told that if we give them all the money, we cut the taxes, we cut the regulations, we do all this stuff to help them, that they're eventually going to take care of us. They're going to be benevolent, like good dictators. Now, a lot of us, we like to believe, no, we're smarter than that. We're a democratic society. But when you look at the polling on a lot of the things in the Build Back Better plan, rural access to decent internet, good roads, bridges, a couple extra years of schooling for kids to get an associate's degree through a community college, these are polling really popular. The jobs that would come out of massive investment in infrastructure, the jobs that would come out of moving towards a cleaner, greener economy. Popular as can be, and that's why they don't happen. Because they're popular with we, the working people, not the billionaires who are stuck in the entrenched interests. They're the folks who are making profit off of the old economy, the exploitive economy. And I'm looking at this moment right now. I'm looking at the moment that we have. If you can get a handful of Democratic senators in line, that we can make historic changes for our kids. We can make historic changes for the future of this country. There's opportunity here. And yet the moneyed interests, they're doing everything in their power to divide us. And the sad thing is, they're winning. It's working. Because there's so much going into their messaging. And they've been in full spin mode for a while now. But it always comes back to the working people. Because in every one of those things, those emails I got today, the thing that they finished up on was, they're going to pass something called the PRO Act. And the PRO Act is either racist or misogynist or whatever. Because, the ABC test. We've taken women from exploitive employment jobs and we've put them into exploitive you're on your own jobs and called them their own boss. And by saying, no, we want you to get better wages, hours, conditions, somehow that's misogynistic. As my grandfather always said, if they was going to make something better for you, do you think they'd really let you do it? And the answer is no. So for me, anytime I see these, I immediately recoil, and I think that's the reaction for most folks. I'm going to take a quick break here. When we come back and talk a little bit about people who have had enough. Quick break, right back after this.
Nothing more American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On the Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 2011. That was the day hundreds of ILWU strikers blocked railroad tracks near Longview, Washington. They hoped to stop grain shipments from moving in and out of the EGT grain terminal. Longshoremen had been sitting down on the tracks throughout the summer, resulting in over 100 arrests. No trains had moved in or out of the terminal since July. But then a federal judge issued an injunction against ILWU pickets. The BNSF Railroad tried to move grain once again. ILWU picketers in Vancouver were able to hold off the train until police forcibly dispersed the crowd. Then, hundreds gathered at Longview to block the train from coming in. That's when police went on the offensive. They used clubs and pepper spray against the longshoremen, arresting 19. They threw ILWU President Bob McElrath to the ground. Rumors spread that police had broken his arm. Hundreds of regional longshoremen rushed to Longview. The Seattle and Tacoma ports shut down in protest. The next morning, 10,000 tons of grain were opened onto the railroad tracks. The grain export terminal was the first to be built in the Pacific Northwest in almost 30 years. EGT hoped to undercut the powerful ILWU, who controlled operations at the port since its founding in the 1930s. The union refused to agree to work 12-hour shifts at straight time. The EGT hoped to break the hiring hall by refusing to recognize maintenance and inside workers at the terminal. They then attempted to fill jobs with workers from the operating engineers, but the ILWU persevered. By the end of January, EGT had backed off many of its demands, negotiations resumed, and days later, the contract was signed.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So we've heard stories all across the country of healthcare workers being underpaid, overworked, mistreated, all under the guise of, well, you know, there are frontline heroes. There are essential workers. Yeah, they're all of those things. And in many places, we're hearing stories of workers saying, you know what, had enough. Enough is enough. That's it. And that's what workers at the University of Chicago Medical Center's Ingalls Memorial Hospital have said. Enough. In fact, they said we want better treatment, we want better conditions, wages, all of those things. And here's the thing: they won one election, and then, well, they had to go back and do it again. So if it's not hard enough to win once, you got to do it twice. Still not getting the respect that they deserve from the University of Chicago Medical Center there at Ingalls. And here to share some thoughts on, well, why, how we got to this point, why this is the way it is. I've asked Dulce Leyva to come talk with us. She's SEIU HC Indiana Illinois Union organizer. She's one of the lead folks on this campaign. Dulce, thanks for taking time for us.
Yeah, no, thank you, Rick. We really appreciate the platform and, the conversation that's going to happen today about this fight over at Ingalls. So what do you want to know? I can tell you it all.
So walk me through how this whole thing started. I read somewhere that you guys ran a campaign a year or so back during the past administration. Something came up. You won the election. They set it aside. You've run it again, and now you're in this spot. Get me to this point.
Yeah, no, for sure. So basically, workers over at Ingalls Hospital have been trying to unionize for over 20 years. And until recently, 2 years ago, pre-pandemic, it was really just the organizing efforts that pushed the election through. A first time, it was a heavy anti-union, union busters being used because the hospital has a resource to do that. They claimed that the first election, the NLRB did a mistake with the envelope. So they said it wasn't a valid victory for the union, although the election was won. So we had two options, and that was under the Trump board was either rerun that election or, fight it in the court. And we decided to rerun it again. And workers, with the bullet, they ran the election again and they won their union twice. Fast forward to now being at the bargaining table. We've been at the table since late March of this year. And every step of the way, it's just been a struggle. Nurses had actually organized a couple of months before the election, was won through SEIU with a different union. And Ingalls is part of a larger health system, the University of Chicago. You just mentioned that earlier, and they have a union representation over at that campus in Hyde Park with Teamster 743 and NNU for the nurses. And really, we wanted to go to the bargaining table and to uphold that standard that's been fought for at this other campus because they're within the same system, although the management of the bargaining table is claiming that they are not. And really mirror those standards to our hospital workers that we represent over at Ingalls, because they shouldn't be held to a different standard. They're doing the same work. They're delivering the same patient care. But management hasn't done that. And that's kind of where we're at right now at the bargaining table. And honestly, we were going to have a member today to share her story. We were having a little bit of technical difficulties. Right. But wanted to share with you a little bit of our demographic and like the makeup of our membership, because I think that speaks volumes to why we are where we're at in our fight right now. No,
and we're going to bring in Lolita Washington. She's a 29-year employee at Ingalls Memorial Hospital there. Lolita, do I have you there? Lolita, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
I appreciate you taking a little time for us. Share with me this story. Why are you involved in this? What made you guys, you and your coworkers, decide that this is what you wanted to do?
Well, why did I get involved? I got involved because there was a lot of issues going on in Ingalls. at Ingalls. We need better health and safety, better wages, better benefits, equal pay, and it's a lot of disrespect.
Right, and
It's
all in
just
this
a
time
lot
frame.
of unfairness going around, and we're just trying to make a change.
Right, and
It's
all in a
time
time when
for a
you're supposed to
change.
be you're supposed to be the essential workers, the frontline heroes. You're put in this position. As I was listening to the organizer talk about the fact that nurses just right around the corner there are making wages that are higher, to me that's a major sign of disrespect. And I was looking at their website, and their explanation is, well, those are downtown people. You folks out here, you're not worth that. That's kind of what I took from that.
Yeah, and that's where we're getting from that, because we all are very good workers, and we're here because we care about our patients. We do a good job. All of us, the co-workers, we all like family, and we feel like we're there, we're doing the job, we're taking care of the patients. We feel like we need to be worth taking care of the patients. They need to show us our worth. We're not getting that.
Right.
They're not showing us what we're worth. We're there during the time. We've been there during the whole pandemic, faithfully, and they don't want to pay us.
Now
They don't want to pay us anything.
This is a company that, as I understand, they're not poor, yet they keep crying poverty. And I do want to bring your organizer, Dulce, back in here to get some thoughts on this, because, we talked a little bit earlier about, this company and just how wealthy they are. This is not a poor company.
No, it's not.
It's not a
They're
poor
very
company
rich.
at all. Actually, and I actually can't hear Lolita, but I want to give you some figures. Is that okay?
Please do.
All right. So they're actually a $1 billion health system. UCMC is worth $4.1 billion, including more than $500 million in cash and $1.2 billion in investments. And they actually received more than $400 million in federal COVID-19 support and came out profitable in that year of 2020 of the pandemic with a total profit of $75.5 million.
Wow. So this is not a poor company, and yet one of the things that they're trying to cry is poverty. Because I was looking at their website, and trying to justify why they weren't paying wages on the same level as the other hospitals, and a whole bunch of the same kind of union busting tactics. So it appears to me from the outside that this is a company that has the resources to pay union busters to build websites and to do the union busting stuff, but they're not willing to pay the wages to keep their employees happy. Seems weird to me.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you, I think one of the direct correlations is that they continue to say that Harvey is in a suburb that opted out of the minimum wage of the $15. And because elected officials opted out, Ingalls doesn't feel responsible to that responsibility of paying folks a livable wage. Instead, they pay poverty wages. We refer to it as a Harvey discount in our campaign, actually. And, this is affecting 365 of their staff, which are union members across a number of different job classifications, including certified nursing assistants, behavioral health techs, phlebotomists, unit secretaries. So it's folks that really are the ones operating that hospital and delivering direct patient care.
Lolita, I want to go back to you for a second, because
Yeah,
when you hear the kind of wealth that this company has, the kind of money that they're throwing around, and then denying you just what should be a basic living wage, what does that make you feel? What does it make your coworkers think?
It makes us very disappointed. It's like a slap in the face to know that a job that you've been on, you've been very committed. We're very good at what we do, lest we wouldn't be there. We're very caring employees, and we take pride in what we do. And it's just very sad that your management feels like we're not worth getting a raise. We're not worth the pandemic pay. we're just not worth anything. But they're all making six figures.
And
It's just totally a disappointment. To me, it's a total disrespect.
now, you've been an employee there for 29 years?
Yes, I have.
And in that 29 years, has the treatment always been like this, or is this something relatively new? Because I've talked to nurses across the country. As you see consolidation happen, as you see bigger hospital systems taking over, you become much more of just a number and not an actual person. And the conditions, they start treating you like machinery. Is that your experience here?
That's the experience now. It wasn't always like that. We were always a close-knit family. You can talk to the supervisors. You didn't have this problem. But now, like you say, it's all about the money, the body, and that's it.
Yeah. So in this moment,
The money, the numbers, and the body. That's it.
right. So in this moment, as you guys are going through this process for a second time, it's hard enough in this country to win an NLRB election one time, but you guys have had to do it now twice. So that this shows me that you guys have the resolve to push forward with this. So what's the message to the University of Chicago Medical Center, who own this Ingalls Memorial Hospital? What's the message to them from you and your coworkers?
The message is we're tired. And we're not giving up until we win this fight. We are in it to win it, and we are not giving up.
And that
it's time for a change.
Ultimately, that I hope is the message that they hear out of this. Let me go back to Dulce here for a second, because that's the kind of message I've been hearing across the country. Is people have had had enough. They're ready to take this on. What's the message for the hospital then in this moment? Because I understand you guys are getting further down the road. What's the message here?
Message is loud and clear. We have a set of priorities. One is that we want to see raises reflective to UCMC's profits that do not leave anyone behind, but raise the floor for everyone to a minimum of 15 to make sure that they don't forget about their most loyal and senior folks and actually bring them to a rate that's worth what the work they do, because at the end of the day, they've been there for 20 plus years. I mean, Lolita's not alone in this story. You have folks that have been there for 20, 25, 30, 40 plus years, and make sure that they do everything in regards to be able to keep them safe, because wages is directly connected. Staffing is directly connected to wages. When you cannot attract employees and retain them, it's a revolving door, and the most affected are the patients and the folks that stick around because they have that loyalty to the organization. But ultimately, I think that our priority here is to make sure that overall we win dignity and respect through all of these priorities, and that they actually put something in the contract that says, look, we're committed to respecting and providing dignity to all of our employees. And I think that's what our win would look like. And the message to the hospitals that our members have spoken, and they're ready to take action and willing to do whatever it takes to get through that finish line, because they've been at it for a long time, and now is not the moment to back down. It's in the contrary, it's a moment in time to take action and send a clear message to management through our collective power and our strength in numbers.
Yeah, it's in this moment that especially now that you've got people who have really had enough of the bad conditions, and I've heard horror stories, especially in our healthcare industry, where a lot of people are leaving because of the stress. The pandemic is taxing people, and then to have an employer who's basically trying to shortchange you at every opportunity, given the fact that they've taken a bunch of government money to help make sure that that people have the ability to pay decent wages, and we keep hearing about these shortages. Don't you want to retain people by paying them the best wage that you can get them, especially considering you're a multi-billion-dollar company? It just seems like a power trip more than it's an economic trip.
Yeah, And can I add something? It's not even about the money because they have it. It's about the power, right? They want to make sure that they keep that power ultimately. And at the end of the day, they just need to stop running this place like if it was a business. Like they're actually treating human lives and they need to put value into that. So we're just asking UCMC to do the right thing and to be the leaders in this as they claim that they want to be. So yeah.
Now, where do you see this going here? Real quick, we got another minute left because I want people to help. I want to know how we can help put some pressure where it needs to be. Make sure that let them know that the community is behind you, because from what I've seen, you guys have gotten really good community support, which I think is important, especially in a hospital system like the one that you're talking about. So can you talk a little bit to that?
Yeah, so we're back at the bargaining table tomorrow. We ask folks to continue and to follow our story, because really, I mean, tomorrow we don't know what's going to happen, right? I think that we've shown and sent management a clear message of like, we're all in, but they're unpredictable because they don't care about wasting their money in their tactics, right? So I think continue to follow our story through our social media, SEIU, HCII, Illinois, Indiana, MK, and also, just really look at Harvey. I think that this is the largest employer in the community. We're trying to get local media there. If we can, put some pressure on them through social media and Facebook and just liking our posts when we put them out there. I think tomorrow we'll give an update through our social media. If people can repost that, right, and tag people within any type of like local organizations that are in there, or like even themselves, like please just do so. We want to start a hashtag of Ingalls Do Better, and that's the one that we've been using. If it can trend, that would be great. Ingalls We're Worth More is another one of our hashtags. So just tag us and make some noise for us, because our members need all the support they can get at the hospital.
Dulce, I appreciate the time. Please keep us up to date on what's going on. Lolita, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. Keep up the fight one day longer. Thanks both of you for being here.
No, thank you, Rick.
Again, you look at this, and the reality is you've got these big companies that have such power, such outweighed power, and the fact that they're going to use this divide is just remarkable to me. So I wish them the best. I hope they'll come back and give us some thoughts on where this is going to go going forward. I'm going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For working people, come to talk.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1903. That was the day that is remembered in Virginia as the wreck of Old 97. Old 97, also known as the Fast Mail, was a Southern Railway freight train. It carried the U.S. mail from Washington, D.C. to Atlanta, Georgia. The train wreck happened on the leg of the trip from Monroe, Virginia to Spencer, North Carolina. The train had come in late to Monroe. It was reported that the railway company ordered the engineer to increase the speed of the train to make up time. The company had to pay a penalty if they delivered the mail late. But when the train neared Danville, Virginia, the tracks curved at the Stillhouse Trestle Bridge. The speed was simply too much. Despite the engineer's efforts to slow the train, it careened off the tracks and plummeted to the rocky ravine 45 feet below. 11 of the 16 people on board the train died, including the conductor, the engineer, and the flagman and both firemen. The railway company blamed the wreck on the deceased engineer. Newspapers across the country carried photos of the wreck. The disaster became the subject of multiple ballads. One version, by Vernon Dalhart in 1924, is thought to be the first million-selling country record in U.S. history. Johnny Cash recorded another well-known version of the song. In 1993, an alternative country band took the name the Old 97s, hearkening back to the disaster and the songs that inspired.
They gave him his orders at Monroe, Virginia. Said, Steve, you're way behind time. This is not the 38. This is old 97. You must put her in Spencer on time.
For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So President Biden got his COVID-19 vaccine booster today. Got it there at the White House. And he said, look, we know how to beat this pandemic. And it saves lives. We need to get folks to get vaccinated. It seems pretty simple. Pretty simple, according to our president, who went on to say his message was, please go get vaccinated. He goes, please get these shots. It can save your life. It can save the lives of those around you. He said, look, he was first vaccinated back before the inauguration. Now 6 months, a little over 6 months later, opportunity to get the vaccine. So over 65, 6 months since the last one, he qualified for the booster. But the one thing that he did point out is that the majority of us are doing the right thing. He said that over 77% of adults have gotten at least one of the shots. That means 23% haven't. And he said, look, that distinct minority is causing an awful lot of us, an awful lot of damage for the rest of the country. He said this vaccine is of the unvaccinated. That's why I'm moving forward with the vaccination requirements wherever I can. And here to share some thoughts on, well, what does this mean? Are we ever going to get back to life as usual? My next guest has written the piece, How COVID-19 Has Changed Las Vegas, and maybe how it's going to change things for the rest of us. That's why I've asked our good friend Helaine Olen to come talk with us. Helaine is an opinion writer over at the Washington Post. Helaine, thanks for taking time for us.
For having me on. And yes, we're coming back to life. And Vegas is back to being Vegas, though with some changes. So I'm of the belief that no one has talked more sense about COVID recently, or really since he's been president, than Joe Biden.
No, and that's really what we need. Someone who's going to put aside some of the nonsense, all of the craziness that we're hearing from the anti-vax folks, and actually talk sense. And the sense is, get the damn vaccine.
Right. I mean, I would point out, and I've made this point before, I would say both sides have been guilty of some unrealistic talk, though I think on the right, it is much, much worse, right? I mean, on the right, you literally have people who believe that, like, you shouldn't take a vaccine, that a vaccine has chip in it to track you. As my younger son says, what about your iPhone? Like, this is craziness, right? But you also have a kind of that is, very scolding of people who are getting vaccinated, who are nonetheless attempting to resume their lives. And I think things Biden has been really focused on and really good about is saying, get a vaccine. This will bring us back to normal. This is how we restore normality. This is how we get on with our lives. And because I think that's the important end goal, is everybody wants to resume their lives. And in fact, in many cases, they have resumed their lives. In some places, they never stopped living their lives, right? I mean, because one of the other things that has gone on is the pandemic has really been influenced by what's gone on in the Northeast, which did shut down, and California, which mostly did shut down. So, huge swaths of the country never really shut down at all, right? Like, I spoke to a friend in Utah. I've spoken to people in Utah the entire time. And they're like, yeah, we've just sort of got on with it. So I think that's an important part of the conversation that often gets left out of these discussions.
Yeah, until they get hit with what we're seeing across the South and the Southwest, where they are being hammered. And now my hometown of Cleveland right now, they're having some problems where the Cleveland Clinic's almost overrun with people.
Right, but it's a pandemic, as Joe Biden says, it's a pandemic of the unvaccinated.
Right.
If you're vaccinated and you have a breakthrough, which is actually quite rare, right? You're not going to be very sick. The chances are incredible you're not going to get that sick. You're going to have what's called a mild COVID case. And that we're going to have to learn how to live with that. Like, we're not Australia. We're not locking down over this stuff again. I don't think people will lock down. My husband and I went out to dinner the other night, And, it was us because I live on mostly East Coast time out here in California. So I was out at 5 o'clock at the early bird time. And it was us and a bunch of like people in their 60s and 70s who were back out. And we looked at each other and like, they're not going back in, are they?
No, and you knew we were going to get to this point. You know you're going to get
Right.
to the point. And it's what it is it's, it's once you get vaccinated, once you start doing the things right, and then we start doing some real contact tracing and where we have to segregate some things, we do what we should have done a year ago. I'm just kind of throwing that out there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much contact tracing is really going on at this point. If you know of some that I don't, please share.
Yeah, well, I look at some of the stuff that's going on in the schools, and we're doing some of that. I think we lost. I think we lost Helaine.
I'm here. I'm back.
Oh, I hate crappy internet. So this is just this is bad.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay. It happens. It is what it is. So when you're in Vegas, because part of this was to talk about what's going on in Vegas and how you've seen things change. What did you see?
I saw mobs out on the strip, slightly disproportionately young, which market research shows is my eye was correct about that. You have a greater return of younger people than more older people. But, it's pretty crowded. I mean, it's pretty mobbed. What you're not getting back so far in any major numbers are the business travelers. I mean, so you've got a lot of leisure travelers coming in, but you don't have tons of business travelers. Business travel's down about 70% for the year. The conventions seem to be getting somewhere between half and 2/3 of their normal people. There are not as many conventions. And this is changing the dynamic of Vegas a bit for a couple of different reasons. Conventioneers, people who travel for business tend to spend their money somewhat differently. They tend to be a little bit more extravagant. They're more likely to order room service, right?
Right.
When somebody else is paying your bills, you know how it is, right? The other thing that seems to be going on is the hotels, in part because of these changes in business travelers, have not hired back at the rate you would think, given that hotel occupancy is now at 80%. Normal Vegas occupancy this time of the year is about 90%. Because you would think, they should be hiring back like crazy, and they're kind of not. And one of the reasons I found out is it could trace us back to the business traveler, right? Because leisure travelers tend to, be Thursday through Monday, Sunday, Monday morning. Business travelers tend to be Sunday through Thursday. So hotels are having this kind of gap in the middle of the week. So the result is that they're not hiring back in quite the numbers you would think, given the occupancy numbers.
Right.
The other issue is that they are trying to automate, partly as a response to some labor shortages, but also, do more with less. But that means less jobs, right? So like they're trying to push people, to give an example of something I experienced, they're trying to push people to check in online and check out online. I'm not sure how successful they've been at the check-in online, because I was on a line of over 100 people when I checked in, and that seems to be a pretty typical experience when I went into Yelp. It seems like most people want to check in person, which makes sense. Like, people have all sorts of, I don't know about you, but like when I check in, I'm like, I want this sort of room, I want that sort of room, right? But I certainly checked out online. I admit I did it. Like, it just was easier, actually.
Yeah. Well, most people do. I mean, most people do slide the bill under the door, you leave.
Right.
I checked out.
Right. Right. So, so you're seeing stuff like that. But the casinos are pretty full at this point. The tables are a little spread further apart than normal, but I'd say they're almost there. The gambling revenues are through the roof. Whether that's people coming in and spending more money, some combination of some online gambling, fill in the blank, right? So, Vegas has, made, as a return. That being said, unemployment's still really high. Nevada has the highest rate right now in terms of unemployment.
And do we see that coming back? Do we see that ever coming back, or are these automated changes for permanent? Are some of the things that you see, is this the new normal?
I'm back again. I'm here. Sorry about that. I think the automated changes are going to definitely make an impact, but I do think a lot of the jobs will eventually come back. I mean, you can't automate cocktail waitress on the casino floor.
We can get robots.
You can, but come on. Like, who's going to sell more drinks? Let's be honest, right?
I wasn't going to go there. But no,
See,
so
I'm female. I'm allowed to go there.
Okay.
Okay.
I wasn't even going to touch that one with a 10-foot pole. So now, what does that mean for the rest of the country? I mean, you knew Sin City was going to come back sooner than anywhere else, because it attracts a certain kind of consumer, a certain kind of tourist. What's this mean for the rest of the country?
I mean, I think it means good, bad. I mean, good is people clearly want their lives back. I mean, this is becoming a very profound thing, right? Most people. It's been 18 months. Pandemics generally run between 18 and 24 months. So even if, so we're coming towards the end, most likely, hopefully. People are, out and about again. You definitely see it. That being said, of course, there could be another round that, could be, could turn out to be something the vaccine doesn't help with.
Yeah.
But I think to assume that's going to happen is probably not in anybody's best interest at this point, to sort of like be scolding about it is what I mean, right? But on the other hand, I think other cities are still having a pretty hard time with it. Places like New York and San Francisco are really having issues because you're not getting, and Washington, because you still don't have real return of office workers in huge numbers. And the economics are such that, let's say, 90% of those office workers come back by January, but 75% of them come back on a 3-2 schedule. You still have a major economic impact that nobody really wants to acknowledge, because these are cities that are predicated, for the most part, on people working, huge numbers of people working in, downtown Washington, Capitol Hill, Midtown Manhattan, 5 days a week. Telecommuting numbers prior to the pandemic were, 5, 6, 7%, 1-2 times a week. I mean, so, to set the sudden mass imposition of what I like to joke about is, casual Friday, but for, remote work, actually could make a huge impact on cities, not in a great way.
Do you see that staying? Do you see the remote work staying stuff, or do you see at some point we go back to pre-pandemic kind of employment?
I split the difference with everybody on this. I think it will stay. I think for elite workers, you'll see people who can do 4 or 5 days a week away. But I think for the massive workers, it's going to be more like a casual Friday or a casual Monday, Friday, or a casual Tuesday. I mean, fill in the blank what day it's going to be, where people will get a day or two, out of the office. Because I think, this is politically incorrect to say because nobody wants to admit it right now, but there are benefits to being in an office. I mean, there's real camaraderie, there's real creativity that's sparked by talking to other people. And the other thing I would point out is that it has always been a very elite phenomenon to be able to work at home 5 days a week through this pandemic, as I don't need to tell you. I mean, the Amazon warehouse person is not working remotely. You can't pull something off a warehouse shelf in your house 20 miles away via computer. You can't deliver a package via computer, or if you could deliver it via drone, that means a job that no longer exists. So, this is something that has, in some ways taken on an outsized part in the conversation in terms of how it really is out there.
Going to be interesting to see how this plays out. Last question I was going to throw at you was, something big happened today. Evidently, 2 Federal Reserve people left, are retiring early. One in Dallas, one in Boston. Any thoughts on this? Yeah, I can't hear you. Well, we'll see how that goes. A little technical difficulty there. Helaine, I appreciate the time as always. Great stuff. I hope folks will take a look at the article, and we'll get that linked out on social media. See how that could work for us. But I'm looking at this, and I was hoping that Helaine would be able to shed some light on why these two Fed leaders had just a little early retirement. Something about maybe they were doing some stock trading while they shouldn't have been while they were there. I don't know. We're going to get to the bottom of it, but I'm curious your thoughts on how we're going to see a return to employment and all of that. I kind of agree with her in the sense that we're going to go back to a workplace that eventually, people have to go back to work. They got to go back to the jobs. I don't see long-term people being able to work from home just because, there's some of that. I like to know where my employees are. I like to control their time. I like to make sure I'm getting maximum benefit, even though some of the productivity stuff that we've seen come out of this has been, from what early indications have been very positive, that people, when they work from home, actually did work. So it was kind of like an experiment. But I think she's right. I think our economy, a lot of it is based on, we got to get people into the workspaces. And then all the economic activity that's generated around getting to and from work and lunches out and all that stuff. It's a lot of stuff. But I think she's right on another front as well, that people want their lives back, and I agree. And this is why I think so many people who have been vaccinated are so frustrated by the 23% of the people around us who aren't. Because, and I think Biden's right on. This is a pandemic right now of the unvaccinated. Because look, I've taken kids to the ball games. We've gone to a couple of concerts this year. It's about getting somewhere back to normal. But every time you look around, you go, is it worth it? Is it worth, because a handful of people are causing chaos for everyone else? Now, look, I understand there are folks who are going to have, issues, and they're probably not people who are going to be in those crowds anyway. They're not the ones who are filling up the stadiums and filling up, Las Vegas. But it would be nice to somehow get past this on the other side. It's a shame we had such difficulty there with Helaine. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you have to go back, will you go back? Do you want to go back to the job site? I think I would like to work from home too. I think that would be a good thing. But I also think, like she said, I think there is some camaraderie and stuff there as well. Gonna take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2.
On this day in labor history, the year was 1909. That was the day the International Lady Garment Workers Union began a strike against the Triangle Shirtwaist Company. Eventually, female workers struck at 339 of the 352 shirtwaist manufacturing firms in New York City. The strike was referred to as the Uprising of 20,000. Women comprised 70% of all garment workers. Men performed the higher paid work of cutting and pressing, while women earned less for assembling and finishing garments. Women often had to furnish their own supplies, including needles, thread, and even sewing machines. Some firms locked the doors to each floor. The workers, mostly young girls and women, had to ask permission to go to the bathroom. While the strike initially started at the Triangle Shirtwaist Company, it soon spread to other factories. At a meeting of garment workers in November, a young girl, Clara Lemlich, called for a general strike. One day later, 15,000 shirtwaist workers walked out of the factories, with more joining the strike the following day. The strike continued until February 1910 and ended with factory owners agreeing to meet the demands of the workers, which included better pay and shorter hours. This strike was a notable achievement for these mostly immigrant working women. Nevertheless, garment workers after the 1909 strike continued to suffer harsh working conditions. A year later, many workers died in the tragic Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire. The fact that the company locked the doors on each floor meant that the workers had no means of escaping the blaze. Today, it's very difficult to find clothing that is union made. We must work together to restore labor unions to protect the safety of those who make our clothing, both in the United States and throughout the world. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
When Donald Trump declared he would fix the U.S. Postal Service, he was using the word fix the same way veterinarians do when you bring in your dog. Trump wasted an inordinate amount of his presidential power and prestige in a failed attempt to neuter an agency that literally delivers for the people. Extraordinary postal workers move our letters and packages by truck, car, airplane, boat, motorbike, mule, and of course by foot, to any address across town or across the country. Both essential and effective, it's the most popular federal agency, with 91% of the public approving its work. Thus, an uproar of protest killed Trump's attempt to gut it. When it comes to bad public policy, however, failure is just a way of saying, let's try the back door. Trump was defeated, but he left behind an undistinguished postmaster general named Louis DeJoy, who had only 2 qualifications for the job. He was a Trump mega-donor, and he was a peer of corporate powers that have long wanted to privatize the Postal Service. In March, before the new Biden presidency had taken charge of the postal system, DeJoy popped through the back door with his own 10-year plan to fix the agency. Rhetorically, his plan promised to, quote, achieve service excellence by making mail delivery more consistent and reliable. How? By consistently cutting service and reliably gouging customers. Specifically, DeJoy proposed to close numerous mail processing facilities, eliminate jobs, reduce post office hours of service, and cut the standard of delivering our first-class mail from 3 days to 5. Oh, also raise stamp prices. This is Jim Hightower saying delivering lousy service at higher prices is intended to destroy public support, opening up the service to takeover by private profiteers. And who gets joy from that? The Hightower Radio Lowdown is brought to you by the Lowdown Happy Hour, live streamed from the Chat and Chew Cafe. Details at hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So we're seeing an awful lot being written about the Occupy movement. A decade ago, like, hard to believe it's been an entire 10 years since the Occupy movement. And a lot of looking back, saying what went wrong, what went right, how could we have done things differently, and some of the old tropes as well popping up. And I find it interesting, the different viewpoints, and we've been talking to a couple of folks who have written books on this, and I think it's important to look back at what it was and what sprung out of it. You go back to the organizing of the teens in the 20s and all through the 30s that brought us the incredible labor movement of the 40s and 50s. It was all of those all that groundwork beforehand that eventually became what was the most prosperous working class in the history of civilization, and a labor movement that had some real power. Are we seeing that kind of organizing going on right now around different ideas? Well, I hope so. And here to share some thoughts on, what the last decade has brought us, some thoughts on the movement. I've asked Heather Hurwitz to come talk with us. Heather's a researcher, sociologist, and also the author of We Are the 99%, the Occupy Movement, Feminism, and Intersectionality. Heather, thanks for taking time for us.
Glad to be here, Rick.
So let's start with why. Why'd we jump in the middle of the book? What brought you to it?
This was an incredible movement. It brought thousands of people into the streets that hadn't been there. And in many ways, it was celebrated as a moment of real mass democracy that the country hadn't seen in quite a few years. And at the same time, I picked up on, and anyone involved in the movement knew, there were a lot of tensions in this movement. This was a movement that was not really satisfied with just that idea of the 99%. It was a movement that didn't for many people, pay enough attention to issues about race, about gender, about sexuality, and made people really question, are we really a 99%? Can we really come together as 99%? What does that really mean?
Yeah. Do you think it's possible? Do you think that you think we could have the kind of class consciousness that someone like I would like to have?
I think we can have it if we have intersectionality with it as well. The idea that Kimberly Crenshaw, professor and lawyer, came up with, that we can't just think about class on its own anymore. And I think some of the best organizers and labor unions are doing this. They recognize that we need to be specific about class, that people of different races and genders have a different experience of class. The Great Recession did not affect everyone the same way.
Correct.
And this is where the movement, really needed to pick up, I think, on that more. And I think other movements can do that.
But, as I look at, movements of the past and, the building blocks that happen, I think Occupy was a pretty significant building block. Now, I remember at the time, the media tried to frame it as a bunch of dirty hippies. It was, it was heavily misogynistic, that they didn't have a message. Was their assessment anywhere near accurate?
Many of the protests were male-dominated. They were white person-dominated. I disagree that they were, hippies. These were people with a vision. It was also a lot of people. At the time the Great Recession was happening, we had a lot of people losing their jobs, losing their homes. This was a source for them to come together and raise really justified grievances. And I think some of those derisive comments forget about that part, that there was really a real meaning behind this movement. And that's how we got the idea of the 99% versus the 1%, which, of course, Bernie Sanders has run with. And it's just common knowledge for us to think about inequality in that way, that before the movement, we didn't have that.
Yeah, and what it also showed is that democracy is messy. I mean, having a bunch of voices, if we're going to be a multicultural, multi-whatever society, it's messy.
Absolutely. There's a lot to celebrate about this movement because they gave it a try. But, I celebrate it so much that I have to critique the movement. We have to learn from this movement and this moment that it was messy because this was a voluntary movement. There wasn't a leadership structure. There wasn't leadership training. There wasn't the idea that women have been underrepresented in leadership positions, and if you really want to make an innovative movement, that has to be front and center, and you have to do the work to bring in new leaders and different leaders.
No, and because one of the things that I said, from the beginning is you're right. There didn't emerge the kind of hierarchy of leadership and of folks that you would expect to come out of this immediately. There were some people that I still follow who were attempting to do some of those things, but it seemed like we were trying to come together while still trying to splinter apart. Because everyone has their own pet little issues and it became apparent in the Occupies that I attended, that everyone had their issue and they didn't want to talk about anything else, which is why I thought it was interesting, at least in the ones that I went to, that they had chosen specific topics, for race issues and for gender issues, to go before others. And I thought they did that deliberately, which showed some leadership.
I experienced maybe something different. There were a lot of different encampments. My research was focused on the New York camp and the San Francisco camps in Oakland. And, some places did better than others.
Right.
Some places did have really strong, people of color working groups that actually raised some important issues and put issues about race front and center. Other groups, not so much. And I think that's where my critique about the structure and the leadership comes in, that there wasn't that coordinated effort I mean, the movement happened so quickly.
Right.
And this is the first time that we saw a really national movement go viral, use Facebook, use Twitter. There's a lot that we have to learn from that moment and kind of set in place so that those side issues in many, many places can be given their time and due, instead of kind of splintering the movement and people feeling, I'm not really a part of this. I'm going to go do my own thing with my own issue. How can we create that more unified big tent movement and bring those issues in? I think that's a real question that organizers need to keep working on.
No, and I guess, part of this for me is, you're talking about so many grievances, so many problems, so much that would encompass this big tent, that there are so many opportunities for division. And I always go back to the Jay Gould quote, I can easily pay half the working class to murder the other half. If you've got these kind of already fault lines of race and gender and orientation and, all the other things that come along with that, it's easy to tear into that and to pit them against each other, so nothing ever gets done. So for me, the fact that there was something of a message, something of a movement that continued out of it, I think Occupy was important, and it was a good thing.
I agree with you. It got people organized in the streets. A lot of friendships and activist happenings came out of it. And over the last 10 years, we've had so much street activism, and it's second nature to so many people now to see people active and pushing for their ideas. And I think we've come a long way. I don't think that you could have a movement again like Occupy that was so focused on the economics, where race issues and gender issues were coming second. After Black Lives Matter, the Women's March, all of the organizing around the Trump administration, I think people have a more complex idea now about inequality. We'd have a different movement today.
But I still think economics is, for me, and this is where my mind is, economics is still front and foremost. And I'm always reminded of the Dr. King quote as, what good is it I can sit at the counter if I can't afford to buy a hamburger? So for me, as someone who grew up in a housing project on the west side of Cleveland, I was a minority and in a minority community. It was, for me, not about black and white. It was about green. It was about economic power. The reality is no matter what, my skin was white and theirs were black, we were still broke. And poverty, to me, is still the one thing that Occupy, really brought the inequalities of income and of wealth, really brought forward for me and for a lot of people. And I still think that that's the thing that can unite us at a core. And then we deal with all the other problems as well. And sadly, it becomes that chicken or egg scenario. Which does come first? Do we push for gender inequality and you're still cheated out of wages? I don't know. I'm curious your thoughts.
We have to be specific about economic inequality, that not everyone has the same experience. Poverty is different depending on the color of your skin, depending on the kinds of opportunities you might have being a man, a woman, a genderqueer person. And I think having a leadership and a membership that recognizes that there are those differences in someone's experience of poverty, it really matters. It matters for building that unity, and it matters for people who have those diverse experiences to feel included. So I agree with you that class and poverty and inequality in an economic sense is hugely important, but we can't gloss over that there are real differences. I mean, During the pandemic, moms and dads had pretty different experiences in a lot of households as far as the burden of the pandemic. Both had burdens, but still different kinds of burdens because of their gendered experiences. And I think that's where we need to take class organizing.
I don't disagree. So how do you do that? Do you do that as a matter of policy? Do you think societal change, you can change people's minds? Because clearly we are now in a moment where we're a polarized country, and a lot of this has to do with some of the things that came out of Occupy, especially as you're talking about race and gender and identity. You now have a much more divided country than we probably were back then. So how do you heal those wounds? How do you bring? I mean, I have my ideas. I'm curious yours.
Oh, that is a tough, big question. I think it's going to take a lot of people working together, and that's where I think that having that intersectional perspective, that we're going to understand economic inequality, but that it's shaped by racism. It's shaped by the history of gender inequality. It's shaped by individuals' experiences based on their sexuality. And then we have a lot of resources available, from LGBTQ movements to feminist organizing. We can form stronger coalitions than we have. This is also a place where I think Occupy gave a lot of interest to bringing in groups that have been working on these separate issues, but didn't integrate groups into the strongest coalition that they could.
Right.
I think if we work in those coalitional partnerships, we can address the issues and form groups that can really work strongly together.
You're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with Heather Hurwitz, researcher, sociologist, author of We Are the 99%, the Occupy Movement, Feminism, and Intersectionality. We'll get links out on social media how you can pick this up. You can get it at all of your favorite bookstores and your online retailers. I'd suggest Powell's Books, not the dreaded A1, but I'm sure they have it there as well. Now, I'm a labor guy. I'm front and center about that. I believe most of our problems can be solved through workers joining and forming unions and collective bargaining, because I believe that gender inequality in the workplace we can change through contracts. Racial inequality, we can do that as well. Identity, we've been dealing with that for decades as well. For me, the idea of a contract in the workplace, I think that's how you drill all of these things down. So for me, the commonality, that intersection, is the economics, is in the workplace, making sure that it doesn't matter who does this job, that they're all paid a transparent wage that isn't any different, doesn't matter who's doing it, and that we treat people with dignity and respect, and that they have an actual voice, a grievance procedure in the workplace. Yet it seems to me a lot of Occupy folks were pushed away from the idea of unions because, they've got the idea of the 60s hard hats, beating hippies with pipes. I'm curious your thoughts.
Oh, I didn't experience that. I felt a real welcomeness to unions joining in on the Occupy movement and bringing messages of solidarity and a desire to work across many different unions. I think the issue then was people were out of jobs and they were doing freelance work. There wasn't a workplace. The workplace, of course, has been changing since the 1970s, but the global recession in the late 2000s has radically transformed our workplaces. And so I think there might have been some of the rub there. Without a workplace to really regulate and people working from home on their own, building their own businesses, or just unemployed,
right?
It made the work situation complicated. And, arguably, we're kind of in that space now with so many people leaving work and doing their own thing and working from home. We got some real different dynamics that I think it's going to take more than kind of a workplace solution because our workplace is so new.
Do you have hope for the future? I mean, in looking at this, do you have hope that we're going to? I have a lot of listeners who are like, it's all doom and gloom from here. You look at how divided we are, and you still got the former guy running around, you wanting to build an army. Do you have any hope for the future for young people?
I have hope for young people because I think that they have grown up with this push for democracy. It's second nature to them, the kinds of protests that have happened over the last 10 years. I think they have a voice. Also, young people, I think, can understand better the kind of global dynamics going on. I think the pandemic has started to lay those bare, the dynamics of globalization. I think that's really a root cause of things. There's a lot of misinformation about kind of why we're in this place that we are anyway. Why all of this, sending jobs overseas, the global supply chain. As people understand that even more, I think there's a reason for that 99% to come together. And so I have hope in those things. I think we've come a long way over the last 10 years as far as also understanding racism in this country. And I am hopeful. I think it's a long way to go, though. There's a lot of work to be done.
There is a lot of work to do, and I hope folks will take a look at the book, We Are the 99%, The Occupy Movement, Feminism, and Intersectionality. We'll get links on social media how you can take a look at that. Heather, I appreciate you taking some time. Good bit of writing. Good stuff.
Great talking with you, Rick. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Heather. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 2011. That was the day hundreds of ILWU strikers blocked railroad tracks near Longview, Washington. They hoped to stop grain shipments from moving in and out of the EGT grain terminal. Longshoremen had been sitting down on the tracks throughout the summer, resulting in over 100 arrests. No trains had moved in or out of the terminal since July. But then a federal judge issued an injunction against ILWU pickets. The BNSF Railroad tried to move grain once again. ILWU picketers in Vancouver were able to hold off the train until police forcibly dispersed the crowd. Then, hundreds gathered at Longview to block the train from coming in. That's when police went on the offensive. They used clubs and pepper spray against the longshoremen, arresting 19. They threw ILWU President Bob McElrath to the ground. Rumors spread that police had broken his arm. Hundreds of regional longshoremen rushed to Longview. The Seattle and Tacoma ports shut down in protest. The next morning, 10,000 tons of grain were opened onto the railroad tracks. The grain export terminal was the first to be built in the Pacific Northwest in almost 30 years. EGT hoped to undercut the powerful ILWU, who controlled operations at the port since its founding in the 1930s. The union refused to agree to work 12-hour shifts at straight time. The EGT hoped to break the hiring hall by refusing to recognize maintenance and inside workers at the terminal. They then attempted to fill jobs with workers from the operating engineers, but the ILWU persevered. By the end of January, EGT had backed off many of its demands, negotiations resumed, and days later, the contract was signed.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
I go back to those Occupy days, and look, we spent a lot of time on the steps of the Capitol, hearing people's grievances, talking about the issues that face people. And look, at the time, I still believe that economics is where we need to fight, because all the other stuff is what they use to divide us. And I've said before, a lot of the issues they're not for most people, they're not front and center. And I know that sounds cold and callous, but we've got to learn to be more tolerant of each other. And this is where the more, especially where I started with our billionaire class funding these divisive think tanks to highlight our differences and to basically rub people's noses in them, has created the kind of divisions that we see so that they can rob us blind. And they've been doing this for a while. This isn't new. So for me, look, I'm tolerant of, you lead your life. And if we can get to the place where, and I've said this before, I don't care. What you do in the confines of your four walls, between consenting adults, that's your thing. It doesn't affect me, and it shouldn't affect me. But when people are allowed to be cheated in the workplace, when we're allowed to have the kind of inequality that we've got, you're creating this race to the bottom. And there's part of me that goes, and look, I want people to be equal. I want people to have the constitutional right to pursue life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That we are all equal in the eyes of the law. But having the economic might to demand that. Having the ability to stand up for ourselves. And I think the workplace is the place where you do that. But here's the thing, and this is the weird part of, and the part I agree with Heather 100%. They have changed our work sites in unimaginable ways, and not for the better. It's interesting in reading some of the writings of the right-wing think tanks. They love the idea that each individual person can be their own business. They're going to be their own entrepreneur. They're going to be their own boss. And what really has happened is they've become responsible for all of the things that they never had to in the past. They're taking on all the risk. They're taking on all of the liability. And as I said before, if it was good for you, they wouldn't let you do it. If it was beneficial for you and not them, they wouldn't let you do it. Now, some will argue, well, it's beneficial for both. No, it's really not. Because overwhelmingly it benefits the employer because they no longer have an employee. They don't have to pay unemployment, Social Security, workers' compensation. You go down the list of all employment taxes, any of that. They pay a flat fee. Here it is, just like the pension situation. They said, no, we don't want to pay those defined benefit pensions. We don't want to be responsible for our workforce. We want them to be responsible for themselves. The heck with them. Once we're done with them, once we've used them up, we can throw them to the curb. This is the same kind of thing. Only under the guise of you're your own boss. You get to set your own hours. You get to do your own thing. And then when you say, hold on, we want to pass a law that says you should be able to set your own hours and do your own thing and be your own boss, then they balk at it. Well, no, that's not what we meant. It's not what we meant at all. The whole gig thing is set up to lower wages. That's it. It's not about you. It's not about the workers. It's about lowering wages for the businesses. It's about cutting that employment line. It's about lowering their employment costs. It's the bottom line. It's the money. It's nothing simpler than that. And they have what they want. They've created the environment that they want. And they're not going to give it up. They are going to fight for it tooth and nail and every opportunity. Some interesting news coming out of Detroit. Evidently, Ford Motor Company is going to partner with this SK Innovation, which I guess Ford Motor Company owns, a Korean battery company. They claim they're going to invest $11.4 billion in building the electric F-150. They're going to be doing that, I guess, in three battery plants in the U.S. I guess Kentucky is where they have decided. One in Tennessee, two in Kentucky. They say it's going to create about 11,000 assembly jobs in the three places. They've announced they're going to spend something like $30 billion through 2030 on electrification. They claim they're going to get to 40 to 50% electric vehicles, global electric vehicles by 2030. That's a little bit of a jump from their prior prediction of 40%. So just here in a couple of years, their production is going to go almost half to electric vehicles. And what I've been saying is, where do these jobs get to go? Where do we incentivize these? And I find it really interesting that two states, and this is one of these things where you go, maybe Biden's Build Back Better plan is rewarding the wrong people, because Kentucky and Tennessee, and if this were the former guy, there's no way that these jobs would be going to states that he lost overwhelmingly. But this is where they're going, Kentucky and Tennessee. I can only hope they're going to be union jobs. I don't want race to the bottom jobs with our tax dollars. And look, the reason they're bringing this manufacturing back to the U.S., even if it is in Kentucky and Tennessee, policy. It comes back down to Biden's plan to help incentivize people to buy electric vehicles, and for those to be union vehicles, and for those to be American-made vehicles. This, in my view, if we can get it passed, smart policy. Now, Ford, I'm guessing, is betting on the reality that maybe we're going to get something done. We'll see. On the other front, you have Joe Manchin, who evidently came out today in a big way against the idea of a carbon tax, which, way to fight for the past. Way to go, Joe. It never ceases to amaze me. Going to take a quick break. Right back with our good friend Bob Ney. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people from the top.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
Ladies and gentlemen, we cannot afford to waste any more time. Let's get to work.
President Biden pushes for unified climate action at UN. China vows to end international financing of coal plants. Plus,
as of today, Illinois is a force for good, for an environmental future we can be proud of.
Illinois passes landmark clean energy and climate law.
All of those stories and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
In California, wildfires have been spreading like, what's something that spreads fast?
Oh, I know, herpes. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, a lot of talk about climate, a lot of talk about climate action at this week's UN General Assembly.
Yes, there was. And in his first address to the United Nations General Assembly this week, President Biden called for nations of the world to unite for collective action on COVID-19 and climate change.
In my view, how we answer these questions in this moment, whether we choose to fight for our shared future or not, will reverberate for generations yet to come. Simply put, we stand, in my view, at an inflection point in history. This is within our power to meet these challenges, to build a future that lifts all of our people and preserves this planet.
But such unity is elusive, in part because of mounting anger at the failure of wealthy countries to meet their pledges to mobilize $100 billion a year to help developing countries cope with the ravages of climate change and build green economies. So Biden announced that the U.S. will double its contribution to the International Climate Aid Fund to more than $11 billion annually by 2024. However, the increased funding requires congressional approval.
I was just going to ask. He can't do that on his own.
Nope. Another big announcement at the UN came from Chinese President Xi Jinping, who announced that China will end financing of new coal-fired power plants internationally.
Nice.
Now, while the move does not address China's plans to build more coal plants at home, energy analysts say it is still a huge blow to international financing of coal, because more than 70% of all coal plants built today rely on Chinese funding. The shift indicates that international pressure on China to do more to cut emissions is working, scientists say that ending the burning of coal everywhere is necessary to avoid catastrophic climate impacts.
And it's got to be done soon.
And it matters because nature is not playing along. New research finds that unprecedented wildfires across the entire northern hemisphere this summer set new records for carbon dioxide emissions. Now, scientists say forest regrowth can eventually pull that CO2 out of the atmosphere again, but only if that forest fully recovers before it burns again. Here in the U.S., a new study shows that fires in the U.S. West are burning at higher elevations than ever before because of climate change. Researchers found that rapid snowmelt and critical dryness are pushing wildfires ever higher, burning terrain that previously was too wet, exposing an additional 31,000 square miles of U.S. forests to fires at higher elevations.
Oh, fantastic.
In other news, extreme heat is the #1 cause of weather-related fatalities in the U.S. by far. So the Biden White House has announced that OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, will establish the first ever federal safety rules to protect workers from increasingly dangerous and common extreme heat events, and it will cover both outdoor and indoor jobs.
Well, that's not a moment too soon.
Some good news. Michigan's Democratic Governor Gretchen Whitmer announced this week that the state will be the first in the nation to construct a segment of road that will charge electric vehicles while they're driving.
Oh, very cool. I've been waiting for this. And in a related matter, really, there is no reason in the world that we couldn't run solar panels along every bit of highway in this country, correct?
Correct.
It just takes the will to get it done.
Yes.
And we ain't got no will.
Ford Motor Company says it is partnering with battery recycler Redwood Materials to create a closed-loop domestic supply chain for the production, recycling, and reuse of electric vehicle battery materials, reducing the need for imports and preventing further damage from mining. Finally, Illinois has become the first state in the Midwest to set hard targets for phasing out the use of both coal and natural gas, and the first in the Midwest to commit to reaching 100% clean energy by 2045. The law includes major investments in environmental justice and boosts the state as an electric vehicle manufacturing hub. Democratic Governor J.B. Pritzker cast it as simply good business.
Doubling our investments in renewable energy, making it clear to the world that Illinois is open for business with long-term stable financing to boot.
Well, good for the land o' Lincoln. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So as I was saying earlier, you've got this this billionaire money going into these right-wing, euphemistically named groups. You know, like the Conservative Political Action Conference, CPAC. Evidently, they're going to have their big shindig in Budapest. Yeah, go to Budapest. And it's going to be put on there by the Center for Fundamental Rights, an authoritarian state with a center for fundamental rights. And our crazy conservative folks are going to show up there to show them how it's done. Yeah, that ought to be fun. And I'm sure C-SPAN will cover it and show just how crazy it's going to be. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the top stories of the day, our good friend Bob Ney, former Ohio Congressman, political analyst. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you, Rick.
So Budapest, I guess that'll be, worth seeing next spring, right?
Yeah, well, in the past they've had these. Well, you have the American CPAC, as you know, and then you have the overseas CPACs. They've had them in Asia, I think Australia, but you know what? They've never ever had them in the European continent, which is very interesting. So they picked Budapest. Now their argument will be that they're going to bring conservative freedom ideas over there by doing that.
Yeah, they're bringing ideas, all right.
I thought I'd throw a twist out there for you.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that.
Did that work?
It did.
No?
I mean, they're bringing ideas. They're bad ones.
There you go.
But they're bringing them with us. Let's get to what's going on here today. The vote on the debt ceiling didn't happen.
Right. Now they have some alternatives, and they can do if we look at the history of the debt ceiling since 1917, because it was kind of created for bonds, then it goes through Reagan doing it, and we've talked about this. Obama actually did it less, and again, it turned into a do or die, vote at that point in time. But the Republicans, in general, used to go along with it. This time, they simply won't, which is not a good move. It's got hypocrisy to it because, if you want to take a stance on being conservative on budgets, Rick, as you know how this process works, you do it when the budget votes, when there's the votes on continuing money, you do it then. The debt ceiling just pays for what you didn't do, which you should have, if you wanted to be fiscally conservative, if that makes sense.
So is this making it look like, because we're only a couple of days away, is this making it look like we're gonna see something of a shutdown?
Well, no, I think what will happen is that they will, meaning Senator Schumer, because he has the issue, not the House. And in fact, in this whole precarious ballgame of basically four major pieces of legislation, which are on the president's agenda, obviously, Schumer has the uphill climb. But what I think he may lean to do is to then just do a clean resolution which continues spending without raising the debt ceiling. He may do that. Otherwise, it turns into where, the Republicans shut down the government, but then again, it's not going to help. At this point in time, it's not going to help Senator Schumer, the Democratic leader of the Senate. He can say, look, they shut it down, but it just won't help. And why are we in this situation? And I want to beat a dead horse on purpose here.
Please do.
We are in this situation because they have this antiquated relic, called cloture. And you've got filibuster, you got cloture, the cloture vote. It's a relic. That's why we're here. It should never be. Period. They ought to change it. No matter who runs the Senate next time, it ought to be changed now. But it's not. So you deal with it. But I think he might do a clean resolution, continue the funding for a couple of months. It buys some time.
But for me, I look at this and it shows how badly the system is broken when you can't get 10 people on the other side to go, we should pay our bills. No, we don't want Granny to miss a Social Security check. No, we don't want families who are going to state parks to be shut out. No, we don't want the draconian stuff that could come of this, hits to our credit rating, whatever. That we already spent the money. We just got to pay for it. This is one of those fights that I just don't get. Other than I know that it's about slowing everything else down. It's about changing news cycles. It's about sucking the oxygen out of the room for the legislation that's going on. But this just seems childish.
I mean, they used to do it, and it was done under Republican presidents. Republicans used to do it under a Democrat president.
Right.
Under Clinton. So all of a sudden, again, it became an issue with Obama, but then again, they yielded to it. This time, with Biden, none of them are yielding to the fact that they have already fought the battle, the fiscal battle, with spending bills, because they really don't do budgets. That's a dishonest thing. They put it out there, budgets. They don't do budgets like you should. But with the fiscal spending, which is right where, if they were true fiscal conservatives, they should have cast their votes at that point in time to, contain the budget or redirect the budget or whatever they wanted to do. Not at this point in time. This is a useless gesture. And I really think, Rick, it doesn't gain the points that they think it gains with their base. I think the Republican base in general is smart enough to know this is not where you do, where you do the fiscal conservative action. You do it on floor votes on real budgets. So it's a chicken move, like in the middle of the road playing chicken.
Yeah.
and it's a dangerous one.
Yeah, I mean, in the past, though, I've always known that they wanted a pound of flesh. I don't know what the pound of flesh they want here is. I mean, the one shutdown, the one time during the Obama term, they wanted sequester, and they ended up getting it. They ended up cutting, draconian cuts across the board without even, without any real forethought. There was always something that they wanted. I don't know what they want here. They haven't articulated. No, we'll get this if you give us. There was no quid pro quo here.
You're right. Every single time there has been, whether it's defense spending, sequestering, you're right. Pay as you go, whatever. There's always been something. And this time there isn't. It's just a pure, we're not going to work with you, do what you want, to make it, bad for the Senate, because even though they're not cooperating, it'll put, Senator Schumer, the leader of the Democratic side, it'll put him in a box. And all of a sudden the whole media attention is going to be on, quote, the shutdown and, back and forth, and it pulls them off their agenda, the Democratic agenda. So I think that's what they want, because you're right. You're totally right. They haven't asked for anything. There's nothing they want.
And that's been my take on it from the beginning. This is just about gumming up the system, slowing things down, trying to drag out so that they can, again, kill the Build Back Better plan, kill the infrastructure bill, whatever. And look, you got Republicans who came across the aisle on the infrastructure bill. That's the crazy part. I wanted to move along to the president got a booster shot today, but had an interesting message saying, look, this is a pandemic of the unvaccinated. Is he trying to reset the pandemic and saying, look, the rest of us, we're ready to move on. It's you, 23%, and this is the number he said, 23% haven't gotten any shots, while over 77% of adults have gotten at least one shot. So he said, look, we're doing the right thing, but for these minority, this distinct minority, they're causing the rest of us an awful lot of grief. Is he right?
Well, I think he's right because, first of all, he promotes the booster shot, which is fine, because he needed to do that. It's the Pfizer booster, and now they haven't came out on Moderna yet. But he needed to do that because, frankly, I do 5 days a week. I surf the news and see what's going on, and I've been in confusion about the booster shots. When you start to read the articles, you're like, okay, who's on first? So I think him coming out about the booster shot, and he got it, I think that's great. That, in my opinion, clarifies, a lot of things.
Shows leadership.
It's good. But he makes the clear point, and this is the scary statistic, 70-some% have had the first shot, not the second.
Right.
I mean, that's great. They got a first shot, but where's the second one? Then we get to the point of the booster. So I think he's got to hammer that home because, the Cleveland Clinic has seen their highest volume of COVID-19 patients since last winter. Columbus, Ohio, the ICU beds, I was told by a nurse today, were full. Well, guess who are the most volume of people at this point in time? Unvaccinated people, and they're accounting for close to 94%, Rick, of the recent hospitalizations. So the president's making a point. 94% are people unvaccinated.
Yeah, and I got to be honest.
Any clearer?
No, you can't. And this is where I go to this point, and I hate sounding cruel and callous, but I'm like, these are some folks we could probably do away with. We could be rid of. I know you're not going there with me, but at some point you just got to go. All right, enough.
Well, I can get a little crass here. I mean, what they're doing, don't we normally call it suicide?
Yeah. Well, that's a good point.
Don't get the shot, go on the ventilator, take your shot.
So is that how I can save my soul?
Assisting themselves to, a suicide venture. I mean, it's startling. It really is.
But you look at all the misinformation that's out there, and you like me, I spend a lot of time looking at reports and all the information that's coming out. You look at credible sources that I think rational, sane people go, these are fairly credible sources. They all seem to be fairly consistent. It's when you dive into some of these other places that you get some really kooky kind of, one guy selling, beet juice with, laced with lima beans or something. This is the cure now. where it gets kind of crazy.
And you make a point that I really do. I understand about about them not getting vaccinated and they're taking the hospital beds, because we could take this a step further, and this is not science fiction. We can take this a step further. Another variant pops up, because we haven't reached the herd immunity, and another really bad variant pops up, and all of a sudden the unvaccinated are really completely at risk, and all of a sudden they're taking all the hospital beds, and other people need treatment. Well, what are you going to do? I mean, then they may come down to saying, well, we've got to take the people that have a chance. You people who are unvaccinated, you don't have a chance.
And this is where I've said capitalism will decide. Ultimately, capitalism will decide, because eventually we're going to see higher rates, like you did with smokers. Eventually, you're going to see people with higher rates for insurance. Eventually, employers are going to have enough of it and say, we can't have unsafe people in the workplace. Eventually, you're going to have places that are going to go, you know what? Hospitals are going to go, well, we got some other buddy coming in. We're moving you out. At some point, this happens, I think.
Correct. That's true. Yes, it does.
And look, I hate being in that kind of a mindset, but at some point, it's almost like we have to get there before people shake awake and go, we're gonna do what has to be done.
Well, I mean, if there are X amount of beds available, X amount of resources, and you have to choose between those, and it's not a penalization thing, but you have to choose between those who weren't vaccinated, they don't have protection, they're in a almost critical terminal situation, or somebody else that has a potential, you save them by putting them in a bed. That's a decision.
Yeah.
Sure, I understand where you're going. That's a decision.
Yeah, but I hate the mentality that I think this way, because my core is I want to help people at every opportunity. But how do you help somebody who doesn't care about themselves and certainly doesn't care about you?
But if this grows, that decision won't be to our thinking. If it grows, that decision will come naturally. You said it best. In the capitalistic society, that decision will come naturally.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, we'll see how this plays out. Wanted to get you because I just saw today the judge in New York, federal judge at the U.S. Second Court of Appeals in Manhattan, said that the vaccine for teachers, the mandate in New York City, the largest school district in the country, can go forward immediately. They had stated on Friday, and now they're saying, look, sorry, you're going to have to go forward and get it done. Even though, and you look at this, 82% of the workers in this school district have already been vaccinated. You're talking about a small minority, 88% of the teachers, 82% of all other employees. A small minority is kind of screwing it up for everybody else.
Well, right. I mean, I've heard from people who, some people are nurses, and they're like, well, I'm going to quit. Well, okay, then you have to quit.
That's your choice.
Say, well, there's no one to replace me. Well, that may be true, but having a nurse, not to pick on nurses, but somebody in a healthcare facility or a nursing home or a hospital that's unvaccinated is just like Russian roulette.
Yep. Speaking of Russian roulette, I got to bring this up. Did you see?
Talked about the Russians in a while.
Did you see the interview with Howard Stern and Herschel Walker?
No, I didn't.
Where Herschel Walker said that he's played Russian roulette at least 6 times because he's competitive. He's hyper competitive and he wants to compete.
I mean, I'm competitive, but I'll play a game of, well, it's a Midwest game, you'd know it, euchre. I'll play a game of euchre. That's about as bold as I'll get.
Yeah.
No Russian roulette.
I got to question whether Herschel Walker actually knew what Russian roulette is.
I wonder. I really wonder.
I'm not. I'm not saying anything. I'm just. That's one of those things that even if you've actually been dumb enough to do it, I don't know if it's something you admit, especially if you're going to run for U.S. Senate. Just kind of throwing that out there.
Right. Exactly.
Or maybe that's the kind of guy we want in the Senate.
Well, or maybe he says, voting in the Senate is like Russian roulette.
There you go.
I mean, who knows,
Last question I got for you. Have you been following this story from South Dakota? The governor's daughter getting this license and the governor putting a little strong arm. Is this going to hurt her in her bid for presidency?
No, I have. What is that story?
Evidently, her daughter wanted to be some kind of I don't know, like a real estate adjuster or something, had to get a license through the state. And evidently the person who was in charge of this 70-year-old woman said, I guess no, I guess didn't meet the qualifications or whatever it was. And there was a meeting in the office, and the state employee ended up leaving the job. But, and then getting fired, I think it was. And then she filed a complaint. They settled for $200,000, and now the daughter has the license.
Wow. So her daughter was turned down for a license, right?
Yeah.
In realty. Okay. And then they bring the regulator in, is what you're saying.
Right. And then they pushed the old lady out because she's 70.
Well,
she filed an age
wow.
discrimination suit. And
Yeah, I don't think that'll be in any of her campaign ads. Do you?
I do. I see, because I got to tell you, she's decisive.
Right.
And I think the base would agree.
And here's what she could run: if I can take care of my daughter, I'll take care of you.
There you go. We're in that kind of a crazy environment,
and it might work.
And
like, remember when everybody laughed that I could shoot somebody in Manhattan?
Yeah, I didn't laugh. I thought he could do it.
At the time. I thought, okay,
Yeah,
Yep.
crazy times. Crazy times.
It is.
Bob, I appreciate the time as always.
Thank you, Rick. Okay, thank you.
Good stuff. Our good friend Bob Ney. I mean, seriously, it's crazy. But I guarantee the base, they'd be okay with it. Just using the power that she has to get the job done. No, it only cost the taxpayers of South Dakota $200,000 to cover this up. And evidently this happened last July. So she's not smartly not saying anything about it just yet. But we'll see. We'll see where this all goes. And finally, evidently there was a big powwow at Mar-a-Lago. Evidently three power executives with ties to the former guy while in office allegedly broke the law in dealing with veteran policies that lined their pockets. They are known as the Mar-a-Lago Trio. Marvel Entertainment Chairman Ike Perlmutter, attorney Mark Sherman, and Dr. Bruce Markowitz. Evidently, this came out in a joint investigation by the House Committee on Oversight and Reform and the House Committee on Veterans Affairs. And what they found is that these guys used their time at Trump's golf club to basically devise a plan on how to use the VA to line their pockets. Now, they've been charged with failing to comply with the Federal Advisory Committee Act. They are folks who were supposed to say, hey, we're benefiting from the work that we're doing, developing programs. It's lining our pockets, and that's not a good thing. What they were trying to do was monetize the medical records of veterans. And you go, yeah, that sounds like a good thing. And you go back to, what I said at the beginning of the Trump administration. Day one, I said, this is going to happen a lot. And eventually we're going to find out a lot of what happened during those 4 years and how much tax money was being, siphoned off to business interests and to friends. Because remember, at the beginning of Trump's tenure in the Oval Office, you may remember that they doubled the cost of being a member at Mar-a-Lago. It went from $100,000 to $200,000 a year. So the schemes and the criming that you have to do to keep up with those kind of golf fees, you got to step up your game a little bit, and you got better access. And what better access than the VA? Because there's a lot of money in there. Now, granted that a lot of money is supposed to go to care for the people that we've called heroes. But if you just skim a little bit, who's going to notice? It'll be interesting to see if any of these people do jail time, because that's the thing for me. You look at these guys get caught. They say, "Oh, we won't do it again. We promise." They get a slap on the wrist, and nothing ever happens. Nobody ever goes to jail. Where there's a guy here locally, didn't pay enough for a soda, I guess up in Perry County, and facing years in prison. There was the guy in Philadelphia who took 3 peppermint patties, spent over 500 days waiting for a trial, couldn't get out of jail. Working people go to jail. Our elites, people who can afford to be a member of Mar-a-Lago, not so much. It shows that we really are in two different worlds, the 99% and, well, them. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com, that's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick at thericksmithshow.com. Make sure you follow us on social media at Rick Smith Show. On Facebook, Twitter, all that. YouTube. Make sure to subscribe and maybe give us a like. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.